I am standing behind a headboard in a bedroom that should not have a mold problem. The homeowner had this house resealed 2 winters ago, brand new double pane windows, fresh weather stripping on every door, a heavy bead of caulk running around every frame in the place. His energy bill dropped the very first month, real money, and he was proud of it. Now I have the headboard pulled 2 feet off the wall, and behind it, right where nobody looks, there is a soft, dark bloom spreading across the drywall, right up into the corner where the wall meets the ceiling. This house is 19 years old. It never had a spot of mold on it in 30 years of a much draftier life. It has had this one for exactly 2 winters, the same 2 winters since the crew finished sealing it airtight. Most people would look at that and blame the window installer, or the caulk, or bad luck. I want you to look at it a different way, because the real explanation is not a mistake anybody made. It is physics, and once you understand it, you will never look at a sealed up house the same way again. Here is my promise to you today. This house did not develop a new moisture problem. It had the exact same moisture problem it always had. The water from showers and cooking and laundry and simply breathing all night. And for 30 years, that water had 100 tiny ways to leave the building on its own. Sealing the house did not add water. It closed the exits. And the fix for that costs nothing but about 20 minutes a day, run at the right moments, which is a lot cheaper than the 5-figure remediation bill a problem like this can turn into if it sits behind that headboard for another 2 winters unnoticed. My name is Walter Beck, and I have spent decades walking through old houses and newly renovated ones, watching exactly this pattern play out over and over. I have seen proud new owners of freshly sealed homes stand in front of a moldy closet completely confused because everyone told them sealing a house was the responsible thing to do, the money-saving thing to do, and nobody ever mentioned the other half of the job. I think about a retired couple I walked through a house with last year who had spent a good chunk of their savings on a whole house resealing and a new heating system, proud as anything of a utility bill that had dropped by nearly half. 8 months later, they called me because their grandson's asthma seemed to be acting up. Every time he stayed over in the guest room, I found condensation staining behind the dresser, a musty closet nobody had opened since the work was finished, and a bathroom fan so quiet and so weak it was moving almost no air at all, despite sounding like it was running fine. None of that showed up on their energy bill. All of it showed up on their grandson. I want to be fair about who is telling you half the story here, because it's not really anyone's fault in the way you might assume. Energy efficiency companies and window replacement crews are not lying to you about the savings. The savings are real, and I am not here to talk you out of them. But there is no line item on their invoice for teaching you to run your bathroom fan longer, and there is no follow-up call 3 months later asking whether your closets smell musty yet. That conversation costs them nothing to have and earns them nothing to have. So for most companies, it simply never happens. Their whole business model is built around the sale and the install, not around what your house's air does for the next 10 winters. So the second half of the job quietly becomes your responsibility, whether anyone tells you that up front or not. So stick with me through this video, because by the end, I am going to hand you the exact daily routine that lets you keep every dollar of those energy savings without ever growing what that homeowner grew behind his headboard. Here is the idea I need you to sit with for a second, because it is going to reframe everything you think you know about moisture in your house. You think a leaky roof or a cracked pipe is the dangerous kind of water damage, the kind that ruins a house. In terms of visible damage per incident, sure, but a leak is local. It shows up in one place. It usually gets noticed fast because water pools and stains and drips, and it gets fixed because it is obvious. An airtight house with no dedicated ventilation does something much quieter and over a whole winter often worse. It produces condensation everywhere at once, on every cold surface in the house at the same time, in a way that nobody is chasing down because there is no leak to trace. That is the inversion behind the title of this video. It is not that sealing your house is more dangerous by nature. It is that the damage it causes is invisible and simultaneous, so it grows for months before anyone notices, while a leak gets a bucket under it on day one. I want to slow down here for a second, because this reframe is the entire point of the video, and I do not want you to miss it while I move on to the mechanism. Every homeowner I have ever met who dealt with this problem started out looking for what they did wrong. They checked the caulk, they checked the window seals, they called the installer back out to inspect his own work. Almost none of them thought to ask what their house used to do automatically that it can no longer do at all. That question, not a defect, not bad luck, not a bad installer, is where the real answer was, hiding the entire time. Let's talk about the actual mechanism, because once you see it, the whole thing stops feeling mysterious. An old, drafty house is constantly exchanging air, whether anyone in it wants it to or not. Every gap around an old window frame, every unsealed spot where the framing meets the foundation, every loose-fitting door is a tiny involuntary exhaust vent. All day and all night, humid air generated inside the house, from showers, from cooking pots, from a load of laundry drying on a rack, from 4 people simply breathing while they sleep, drifts out through those gaps and gets replaced by drier outside air. Nobody planned it. Nobody ran a fan for it. It just happened, constantly as a side effect of the house being a little bit leaky. Seal every one of those gaps, and that exchange does not happen anymore. The water vapor your household produces every single day, and a typical family produces a genuinely large amount of it, has nowhere left to go on its own. It stays inside the house, drifting around as invisible vapor until it touches the coldest surface it can find. That might be a window pane, the corner where an exterior wall meets an uninsulated ceiling, the back of a closet built against an outside wall, or a headboard pressed flat against cold drywall with almost no airflow behind it. The moment that warm, humid air touches a surface cold enough, it gives up being vapor and turns back into liquid, the exact same trick as a cold glass of lemonade sweating on a summer countertop. The homeowner did not create new moisture when he sealed his house. He simply closed every door that moisture used to walk out through on its own. Let me put real numbers behind this so it stops feeling abstract. A family of 4 showering, cooking, and breathing overnight in a normal house can put several gallons of water into the air over the course of a single day. In a drafty old house, most of that leaves through gaps and gets replaced by outside air before it ever has a chance to build up. In a newly sealed house with no dedicated ventilation, I have watched indoor relative humidity climb from a comfortable 40% to well past 60% in under a week during a cold snap, simply because that water had nowhere left to go. 60% is not just an uncomfortable number. It is roughly the threshold is where most common indoor molds start finding a sealed house genuinely hospitable, which is exactly why the timeline in these cases is measured in weeks and months, not years, and why a house that felt perfectly fine on move-in day can grow a real problem before the first snow even melts. Now let me show you why this spreads out instead of staying in one place, which is the whole reason it does more total damage than a single leak usually does. A leaking pipe has one source and one path, so the water damage follows that one path and usually announces itself with a stain, a drip, or a warped floorboard, and it gets fixed. A sealed house with no ventilation has dozens of cold points spread across the entire structure, all losing the exact same battle to the exact same trapped moisture at the exact same time. The corner behind a headboard, the ceiling above a closet, the baseboard along an exterior wall, the underside of a bathroom cabinet, they can all be quietly collecting condensation on the same January night. And because none of them drip or stain in an obvious way early on, none of them get noticed until someone finally moves a piece of furniture or opens a door that has stayed shut for months. So here is the actual fix. And I want to be clear about this up front. Sealing your house was not the mistake. The mistake is stopping there, because sealing only did half the job, and almost nobody sells you the other half. The other half is deliberate mechanical air exchange, replacing the accidental kind your old drafty house used to give you for free. It costs almost nothing, and it takes about 20 minutes a day if you do it consistently. Start with your bathroom exhaust fan. Run it for a full 20 minutes after every hot shower, not the 2 minutes most people give it before switching it off on the way out the door. A single hot shower dumps an enormous amount of water vapor into a small room in just a few minutes, and 2 minutes of fan time barely scratches the surface. In a sealed house, that leftover humid air has nowhere else to go, so it drifts under the bathroom door and settles into the nearest cold surface it can find, which is very often a bedroom wall right next door. Check your kitchen exhaust fan while you are at it, because this is a mistake I find constantly. A lot of kitchen range hoods, especially older or cheaper ones, do not actually vent outside at all. They just pull air through a charcoal filter and blow it right back into the kitchen, which does almost nothing for moisture, only grease and smoke smell. If your hood is not ducted straight outside through the wall or the roof, it is not helping your humidity problem no matter how long you run it. Bring in cross ventilation the same way I would for any damp room. Open 2 windows on opposite sides of the house for 15 to 20 minutes, ideally early morning or late afternoon, when outside air tends to run driest. This is the deliberate version of the accidental leaks your old drafty house used to have, done on your own schedule instead of constantly. Get a hygrometer, the same $10 to $15 tool I talk about in almost every video on this channel, and put one in every room that has given you trouble. If you can only afford one to start, put it in whichever bedroom sits on the coldest, most exposed exterior wall of the house, since that room will usually show you the worst number first and give you the earliest warning. Aim to keep indoor relative humidity below 50% through the winter, and treat 60% as a hard ceiling you never want to cross. A tightly sealed house can climb past that number in a matter of days. if nobody is running any ventilation at all, and the number will tell you long before a visible stain does. In winter, dry your laundry outside or in a garage instead of on a rack inside a closed bedroom, because a single load of wet laundry drying indoors can release several pints of water directly into your air, and a sealed house has nowhere for that water to go but into your coldest walls. And pull furniture a couple of inches away from every exterior wall, especially headboards, dressers, and bookcases. Air needs to actually move behind them, or that little pocket of dead space becomes its own private cold spot, quietly condensing moisture all winter long, completely hidden from view, exactly like the one I found behind that headboard at the start of this video. Let me walk you through this room by room, because a sealed house does not fail the same way everywhere at once. In bedrooms, your biggest enemy is exactly what I showed you at the start of this video: dead air pockets behind furniture pressed against exterior walls, combined with a full night of breathing in a closed room. Morning ventilation right after you get up, even just 5 or 10 minutes with the door open to the rest of the house, does an enormous amount of work here. In bathrooms, the enemy is obvious, but chronically undertreated, because almost everyone underestimates how much water a single hot shower releases and how long it takes a fan to actually clear it. 20 full minutes every time is not a suggestion. It is closer to a minimum. In kitchens, the enemy is a recirculating range hood that everyone assumes is venting outside when it is not, combined with pots left uncovered and simmering for long stretches. A lid on a pot cuts the water vapor escaping into your kitchen air dramatically, for whatever that is worth on a busy weeknight. In basements and any room with an exterior wall that stays cold year-round, the enemy is a slow, steady background level of humidity that never gets a dramatic spike, so it never triggers anyone's attention the way a foggy window does, sometimes climbing for an entire season before anyone thinks to check it. This is exactly why a hygrometer left sitting in a basement corner earns its keep, catching a slow climb that nobody would ever notice just by walking through. And in closets built against exterior walls, the enemy is simply that nobody opens them enough to let air move at all, sealed house or not, which is why I tell you in almost every single video on this channel to crack them open and smell before you look. Leave the closet door propped open a couple of inches whenever you can, even overnight, since that tiny gap alone often does more good than people expect for a space that otherwise sits sealed inside a sealed house. And in an attic above a sealed living space, the enemy is warm, moist household air sneaking up through light fixtures, attic hatches, and gaps around plumbing stacks, then condensing on the cold underside of the roof deck in winter. This one rarely shows up as a stain you can see from inside the house at all, which is exactly why it does the most damage before anyone notices, quietly soaking into roof sheathing and insulation for months at a time. Let me give you the actual diagnostic routine, too, because catching this early is a lot cheaper than fixing it late. On a cold morning, run your hand along the corners where your ceiling meets an exterior wall, especially above closets and above bathrooms. A faint chill is normal. A patch that feels distinctly colder and slightly damp than the rest of the ceiling is worth a closer look with a flashlight. Open every closet built against an exterior wall and smell before you look. The same rule I give you in almost every video on this channel, because your nose catches trouble before your eyes do. And check your new windows first thing in the morning during a cold snap. A little bit of light fogging along the very bottom edge of the glass is common and mostly harmless. A window that is fully fogged corner to corner or actively dripping down onto the sill is telling you your indoor humidity is running higher than that window can handle, and it is worth acting on that signal immediately rather than waiting for a stain to show up somewhere else in the house. Keep a simple written log for the first couple of weeks after you start paying attention, just a date and a humidity number for your worst room, jotted down on a notepad on the fridge. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but a string of numbers climbing night after night tells you something a single reading never can, and it is usually the difference between catching this in week 2 instead of month 5. Now let's talk about the mistakes, because I have watched homeowners make every one of these after a ceiling job. The first mistake is blaming the new window itself. I hear this constantly. Someone convinced their brand new, expensive window is defective because it fogs up every morning, when in reality that window is doing exactly what glass does when warm, humid indoor air meets a cold surface. The window did not create the humidity. It is just the coldest, most obvious surface in the room. So it shows the problem first and gets blamed for it. The second mistake is buying a dehumidifier to treat the symptom without ever restoring any real air exchange. A dehumidifier run in a sealed room with no ventilation is fighting a losing battle against moisture that never gets a chance to leave the house at all, and you end up paying for that machine's electricity every single day, instead of spending 20 minutes running a fan or opening a window. The third mistake, and one that surprised me the first several times I saw it, is a family bringing in a portable humidifier for dry winter skin or a stuffy nose in a house that is already sealed and already struggling to get rid of the moisture it has. That single machine can undo weeks of careful ventilation habits in a matter of days, because it is actively adding water vapor to a house that has no good way to remove it. If you genuinely need a humidifier for comfort in a sealed home, pair it with real ventilation and check your hygrometer far more often than you would in a leakier house. The fourth mistake is the one that quietly cancels out the entire project. Partway through winter, someone notices the house feels stuffy or a window keeps fogging, and their solution is to just crack a window open and leave it open for hours, sometimes for the rest of the season. That single habit alone can erase a meaningful share of the energy savings that sealing the house was supposed to deliver in the first place, when 20 minutes of directed cross-ventilation at the right time of day would have solved the exact same problem for a fraction of the heat loss. The math on this is worth spelling out, because it is the whole reason 20 focused minutes beats a window left open all afternoon. A short, complete swap of the air in one room, done once or twice a day, loses that room's heat once or twice a day. A window left cracked for hours bleeds heat continuously the entire time it sits open, even though it is barely moving any more total air than the short focused swap already did in the first 20 minutes. Past that point, you are not gaining meaningfully drier air, you are just losing heat for free, which is exactly backwards from the entire reason someone sealed the house in the first place. The fifth mistake, and one I see just as often as the others, is doing all of this correctly for a single winter and then quietly letting the habit slide the following year because the mold problem never came back and the routine started to feel unnecessary. Ventilation is not a repair you finish once. It is a habit that replaces a physical feature your old house used to have built in for free, and it has to keep happening for as long as the house stays sealed. Now, I want to be honest with you about the limits here, because that honesty is exactly what makes this useful instead of just another scary video. Sealing your house was not a mistake, and I am not going to sit here and tell you it was. The energy savings are real, and they are worth having. The mistake is treating sealing as a finished project on its own, when it was only ever half of one. In a house that is sealed very tightly, especially a newer, highly efficient build, the long-term right answer is often a dedicated mechanical ventilation system with heat recovery, a piece of equipment that brings in fresh outside air continuously while capturing most of the heat you would otherwise lose. That is a real permanent solution, and I want to say clearly that it usually is not cheap, often running well into 4 figures installed, and it is genuinely outside the scope of what a bathroom fan and an open window can fully solve in a very tightly sealed modern home. I would rather tell you that honestly than pretend a 20-minute routine fixes every single case, because overpromising is exactly what got that homeowner into trouble behind his headboard in the first place. Here is a simple, honest way to know which category your house falls into. If your hygrometer routine, the exhaust fans, the cross ventilation, the furniture pulled off the walls, keeps your indoor humidity comfortably under 50% through a normal cold spell, you are in the majority of sealed houses, and the habits in this video are genuinely enough on their own. Give the routine a full 2 to 3 weeks before you judge whether it is working, because a house that has been trending damp for months will not fully reset in a single day, no matter how faithfully you run the fan. If you are running that same routine faithfully and your numbers still keep creeping back up past 60%, especially in a smaller, newer, very tightly built home, that is a real signal that your house is sealed tighter than a fan and a window can keep up with. And it is worth getting a quote for mechanical ventilation with heat recovery rather than fighting the same losing battle every single winter. One more honest limit before I move on. Everything in this video assumes your house was otherwise built and insulated reasonably well before it was sealed. If you already had a chronic bulk water problem, a leaky roof, a foundation that takes on groundwater, or a persistently damp crawl space underneath, sealing the house tighter can make an existing bulk water issue feel worse, faster, simply because the drying path that used to carry some of that moisture back outside is now gone too. Ventilation habits help with everyday human-generated moisture. They are not a substitute for actually fixing a real leak or a drainage problem at its source, and no amount of fan time will outcompete an ongoing structural water issue. And I need to say this last part clearly because it matters more than any dollar figure on an energy bill. A sealed house does not just trap moisture. It traps everything else you generate indoors too. And people with asthma or a respiratory allergy are often the first ones in the house to notice something is wrong, sometimes before anyone ever sees a visible stain. If you notice symptoms that consistently improve when you are away from home and come back the moment you walk back in the door, that pattern is worth taking to a doctor, not just to a contractor. Fixing the wall behind your headboard matters. It does not replace paying attention to your own health first, especially for a child sleeping in a room you have not checked behind the furniture in a very long time. I also want to mention new construction specifically because I get asked about this constantly. A brand new house built to modern energy codes is often sealed tighter right out of the gate than an older home ever gets after a renovation, and plenty of builders do include some form of mechanical ventilation by code in certain areas, but plenty of others meet only the bare minimum. If you are moving into new construction, ask directly what kind of a ventilation system the house has, whether it runs continuously or only on a timer, and where the fresh air intake actually is. That is a 5-minute conversation with your builder that can save you the exact situation I opened this video with. So here is what I want you to do this week. If your house has been sealed up in the last few years and you have never really thought about ventilation since, buy a hygrometer. They run about $10 to $15 at any hardware store. Put it in your bedroom and in any closet built against an exterior wall, and just watch the number for a few cold mornings before you change anything. If it is regularly sitting above 50%, start the routine I gave you today, the full 20-minute exhaust fan run, the cross ventilation windows, the furniture pulled off the wall, and watch that number come back down. A quick note before I go. None of this means you should leave a window cracked all winter just to be safe. And none of it means you should feel bad about a decision that is genuinely saving you real money every single month. It just means the job has two halves, and today you learned the half nobody puts on the invoice. Tell me in the comments whether your house has been sealed, resealed, or gotten new windows in the last few years, and whether you have noticed anything like this since. I read every single one, and it tells me exactly which room to dig into next. And honestly, a lot of the ideas for these videos come straight from patterns I notice repeating across dozens of your comments. Next time, I am going to show you the simple test I use with nothing but a square of plastic wrap and a piece of tape to tell whether moisture on a basement wall is coming from inside your house or seeping in from the ground outside, because the fix for each one is completely different. One is a ventilation habit and the other is a drainage repair, and using the wrong one on the wrong problem wastes both your money and your entire weekend. Keep it dry and keep looking in the corners.